Tonight, we uncover the unsettling reality that the edge of our universe is not a final boundary, but a profound hallucination of the human perspective. Imagine standing at the absolute end of existence, where the last star flickers out and the darkness becomes absolute. You reach out your hand, expecting to feel the cold, unyielding surface of a cosmic wall, a barrier between everything and nothing. For centuries, this was our comfort, the idea that the universe, however vast, was a container with a defined shape. But as you step forward into the void, something terrifying happens. The wall doesn't exist. You don't hit a barrier, and you don't fall off a ledge. Instead, the edge you've been chasing simply retreats, maintaining its distance like a phantom. Every telescope we build and every calculation we make is whispering a secret we aren't evolved to hear. We are biological machines trapped in a logic of limits, desperately, searching for a cage that isn't there. The edge of the universe is a ghost, a glitch in the way your brain processes reality, and tonight we are going to dismantle the illusion of the boundary once and for all. Since the moment our ancestors first looked up from the savannah, we have been obsessed with the concept of the outer limit. We define our lives by walls, fences, and horizons. This is not just a habit, it is a biological necessity. To our primitive brains, a forest that never ends is a death sentence, and a valley without a border is a place where you can never be safe. This deep-seated evolutionary bias has gifted us with a persistent mental phantom that cosmologists now call a cognitive artifact. We project edges onto the cosmos not because the universe has them, but because we are incapable of imagining a reality without them. We are like ancient sailors who were certain the ocean must eventually pour over a jagged lip of stone into an abyss, simply because they couldn't conceive of a surface that loops back on itself. To understand how wrong we've been, we have to look back over 2,000 years to a man named Archytas. He proposed a thought experiment that has haunted philosophers for millennia, the javelin argument. Archytas asked us to imagine traveling to the very edge of the universe. If you stood there and threw a javelin outward, what would happen? If the javelin hit a barrier and stopped, then that barrier must itself be part of the universe, meaning you haven't reached the edge. If the javelin flew past the edge and into the void, then space must exist beyond that point, meaning, again, that the edge was an illusion. This logical trap reveals a disturbing truth. The moment you define a boundary, you implicitly define something that exists on the other side of it. But the universe, by its very definition, is all there is. If there is something outside of everything, then everything was never the whole story. This is where our modern misunderstanding begins to crumble. When you hear the phrase, the edge of the universe, your mind likely visualizes the limit of the observable universe, a sphere roughly 93 billion light years across. But this is not a physical wall. It is a limit of perception. Think of it as a cosmic fog of time. Because light has a finite speed, when we look out into the distance, we are actually looking back into the past. The edge we see is simply the point where the universe was so young that light hasn't had enough time to reach us yet. If you were to instantly teleport to that supposed edge, you wouldn't find a wall of fire or a black abyss. You would see exactly what you see from Earth, a vast, star-filled sky stretching out in every direction. The edge would have moved, staying exactly 46 billion light years away from your new position. It is a horizon that follows you, a boundary of knowledge rather than a boundary of space. But the mystery goes much deeper than just a limit of light. If the universe has no physical boundary, we are forced to confront the possibility that reality is finite but unbounded. This is a concept that breaks the human brain because it defies our three-dimensional intuition. Imagine an ant crawling on the surface of a massive balloon. The ant can walk in any direction forever. It will never hit a wall, and it will never fall off an edge. To the ant, its world appears infinite, and yet the surface of that balloon is clearly finite. It has a measurable area. The ant is living in a two-dimensional world that is curved through a third dimension it cannot see. Our universe may be the higher dimensional version of that balloon. We are the ants, crawling through a three-dimensional space that is curved through a fourth spatial dimension. In this model, there is no outside and there is no edge because the universe is a self-contained loop. If you flew a spaceship in a perfectly straight line for long enough, you wouldn't reach a boundary. You would eventually see the back of your own head as you return to Earth. From the opposite side of the sky, this is the no-boundary proposal, a reality where space and time form a smooth, closed geometry with no origin point and no final exit. This realization brings with it a profound sense of existential unease. If there is no edge, then the universe is not a container that holds us. It is a structure that is us. We are so accustomed to the idea of inside and outside that the thought of a reality that simply is, without a container, feels like a betrayal of our senses. We have spent centuries looking for the exit, only to realize that we are part of a system that has no doors. The edge was never a destination to be reached. It was a psychological threshold we constructed to make the infinite feel small enough to manage. As we look deeper into the lore of the cosmos, we find that even our most basic elements hint at this structural strangeness. Consider the lithium problem. Our current models of the early universe predict a specific amount of lithium should have been created in the first moments after the Big Bang. But when we look at the oldest stars near the perceived edge of our time horizon, we find 3 times less lithium than there should be. It's as if the ingredients of our reality don't match the recipe we've been using. This threefold discrepancy is a screaming alarm that our understanding of the universe's beginning and its boundaries is fundamentally incomplete. We aren't just wrong about where the universe ends, we are likely wrong about how the laws of physics themselves behave as we approach the limits of our perception. The edge isn't a place you can visit, it is an information limit where reality itself begins to lose its coherence. As we gaze toward that 46 billion light-year ghost, we are seeing the farewell photos of galaxies that have already crossed the event horizon of our perception. They are disappearing, red-shifting into oblivion, not because they've hit a wall, but because the space between us is stretching faster than the speed of light can bridge. We are becoming increasingly isolated in a bubble of our own making, watching as the rest of the cosmos vanishes into the unbounded beyond. The true edge of the universe is not 46 billion light-years away. It is the fourth dimension saturated around every atom in your body, a boundary that is everywhere at once, yet completely unreachable. We were wrong about the edge because we were looking in the wrong direction. We were looking out when the secret was hidden in the very geometry of the space we inhabit. Think for a moment about the simple, everyday act of cracking an egg into a bowl. You take a whisk, and with a few rhythmic motions, you churn, refine, and beat that yolk and white into a singular yellowish mass. Once the egg is scrambled, it is fundamentally changed. The original, perfect structure is gone, replaced by a chaotic mixture. Now imagine that you had lived your entire life in a world where you had only ever seen scrambled eggs. You have never seen the shell, never seen the clear division of the white, and never witnessed the golden sun of the yolk. If someone asked you to look at that mass of mush and describe the object it once was, could you even begin to envision a whole egg? This is the central paradox of our existence. We live in a universe that has been churned and beaten by billions of years of cosmic evolution, and for a century, we believed we had finally figured out the recipe. We thought we knew exactly how long the cooking had been going on, 13.8 billion years, and we thought we knew exactly what the uncooked state looked like. But as we point our most advanced sensors toward the most distant reaches of time, we are realizing that the universe, much like an egg, is nearly impossible to unscramble. For decades, the hot Big Bang model was our comfort, a bounded timeline that gave us a clear beginning to the story. It told us that everything began at a single point of infinite heat and density, which then exploded outward, cooling and diluting over eons. We built our entire understanding of reality on this 13.8 billion year clock, convinced that if we just looked far enough back, we would see the very first stars and the very first galaxies slowly, tentatively coalescing out of the primordial mist. This was the nursery phase of the universe, a sparsely populated, dark, and intermittent place where gravity was only just beginning its long work. We expected to see tiny, dim proto-galaxies, the first cracks in the eggshell of time. To find them, we spent $10 billion in decades of human ingenuity to launch the James Webb Space Telescope, a 6,500-kilogram monster designed specifically to peer through the infrared fog and witness these first flickers of light. We wanted to see the cooking process in progress. But when the first data from Webb began to stream back to Earth in early 2025, the images didn't show a nursery. They showed a bustling city. This is the crisis in cosmology, a term that has sent shockwaves through the scientific community. At the very edge of our temporal horizon, a place where, according to our models, there should only be cold gas and the faint glimmers of the first stars, Webb-resolved objects that simply should not exist. The most haunting of these is a galaxy designated as MOM Z14. When we look at MOM Z14, we are seeing it as it was a mere 280 million years after the Big Bang is thought to have happened. In the grand timeline of the cosmos, 280 million years is a heartbeat. It is the blink of an eye. According to every simulation we have ever run, it takes billions of years for gas to cool, for stars to live and die, and for enough matter to aggregate into a massive, shining galaxy. Yet, MOM Z14 is not a tiny, intermittent cluster of stars. It is bright. It is massive, and it is fully formed. It is an impossible galaxy, a finished, cooked meal that appeared on the table before the oven was even preheated. The implications of MOM Z14 and its siblings are deeply unsettling. It's as if you walked into a kitchen, turned on the stove, and immediately found a perfectly risen souffle waiting for you inside. If these galaxies are real, and the data suggests they are, then our bounded timeline is fundamentally broken. Some researchers are now forced to consider the unthinkable, that the universe might not be 13.8 billion years old, but nearly twice that age, perhaps 26.7 billion years. But even that adjustment doesn't solve the deeper mystery. If the universe is much older than we thought, why does the cosmic microwave background, the oldest light we can see, tell us such a different story? We are faced with two terrifying possibilities. Either our observations of the edge are profoundly wrong, or our entire model of how the universe began is a collective delusion. This is the scrambled egg paradox in its purest form. We have been trying to unscramble the history of the universe by looking at the finished product, but the pieces no longer fit the container we built for them. We see supermassive black holes at the hearts of these early galaxies that are billions of times the mass of our sun, yet they exist at a time when there shouldn't have even been enough time for a single large star to collapse. These black holes are breaking the speed limit of growth, consuming matter at rates that defy the laws of physics as we know them. We have even found stars like Methuselah, which appear by some measurements to be older than the universe itself, when the ingredients of the scramble are older or more complex than the egg they supposedly came from. You are forced to realize that the boundary of the beginning is just as much of a hallucination as the boundary of space. We were wrong about the edge of the universe because we assumed it was a fixed point in time, a 0 hour where everything began. But the crisis in cosmology suggests that time doesn't have a neat, sharp edge. We are seeing too many galaxies, too much light, and too much structure too early in the story. This suggests that the early universe wasn't a singular point of origin, but perhaps a transition from something else entirely. Some theorists are now whispering about dark time, a hidden epoch that expedited the development of cosmic structures, or perhaps the no-boundary proposal where time itself becomes a spatial dimension at the start, removing the need for a singularity or a beginning at all. The edge of time, much like the edge of space, is a cognitive artifact. We insisted on a Big Bang with a definite start date because our human experience demands a before and an after. We needed a boundary to make the infinite feel small enough to grasp. But as MOME Z14 shines its impossible light across 13 billion light-years of void, it is telling us that the universe doesn't care about our need for boundaries. It is a self-contained, infinite cycle that didn't need to start in the way we imagine an egg being cracked. The scrambled egg isn't just a metaphor for the complexity of the cosmos, it is a metaphor for our own failed logic. We have been looking for the shell of the universe for centuries, only to realize that we are swimming in an infinite yolk that never had a container to begin with. And if there is no beginning and no edge, then we are left with a reality that is far more vast and far more disturbing than a simple explosion in the dark. Let's talk about the ghost that haunts every map of the cosmos, the number 46 billion. If you open a textbook or watch a standard documentary, you will be told that the edge of our universe lies exactly 46 billion light-years away in every direction. This number is often presented as a hard limit, a boundary for the known universe that defines the sphere of everything that is. But 46 billion is not a physical location. It is a haunting, a spectral reflection of the speed of light and the age of time. It is what cosmologists call the particle horizon, and to understand why it is a ghost rather than a wall, you have to understand that the universe is currently engaged in a vanishing act so profound it challenges our very right to observe it. Imagine, for a moment, that you possess a ship capable of defying every known law of physics, an Alcubierre-class warp-drive vessel that can surf the expansion of spacetime itself. You pick a point on that 46 billion light-year horizon, and you burn the mass energy of entire stars to reach it. You expect to find the end of the world. But as you travel, a disturbing thing happens. The horizon doesn't get closer. It simply retreats. For every light year you gain, the expansion of the universe creates new space in front of you. If you were to reach the spot where that edge used to be, you would look around and see exactly what you see from Earth, a vast, star-filled sky stretching out another 46 billion light years in every direction. The edge you were chasing was never a place. It was a farewell signal from light that had just enough time to reach your eyes. It is a boundary of knowledge, not a boundary of space. But here is where the story turns from a scientific curiosity into a cosmic tragedy. We are not just living in an expanding universe, we are living in a darkening one. There is a second, much closer boundary that most people never hear about, and it is far more terrifying than the 46 billion light-year ghost. This is the cosmic event horizon, and it sits a mere 16 billion light-years away. This is the true point of no return. Any signal emitted from a galaxy beyond 16 billion light-years today, any message, any flash of a dying star, will never reach us. Not in a million years, not in a trillion years, not if the universe lasts forever. The space between us and those distant worlds is expanding faster than the speed of light can bridge. They have effectively left our reality, even as we can still see them. When you look through a telescope like the James Webb at a distant ancient galaxy like GNZ11, you are looking at a ghost. We see GNZ11 as a faint red smudge, a portrait of a galaxy as it was 13.4 billion years ago. But because the universe has expanded since that light left, that galaxy is currently over 32 billion light-years away. This means that GNZ11 has already crossed our event horizon. The image we see in our telescopes is a farewell photo, a frozen, motionless relic of a world that we can no longer influence and that can no longer influence us. We are essentially peering into a graveyard of possibilities. We see the light of these galaxies, but we are seeing their past selves. The light they are emitting right now will never reach us. They are already beyond the edge of our future. This leads to a staggering and deeply unsettling statistic that the outlier videos rarely mention. When you look at the night sky, you are looking at a grand illusion of connection. Based on our best calculations, 96.7% of the galaxies we can currently see in our observable universe are already unreachable. They are already gone. Their light still reaches us like a lingering echo, but they have moved past the threshold where any physical interaction is possible. We are theoretically set to see a total of nearly 5 trillion galaxies, but 4.6 trillion of them are already ghosts. They are farewell photos that will slowly fade, redshifting into longer and longer wavelengths until they disappear into the infrared silence. Think about the scale of this loss. At this very moment, roughly 60,000 stars are disappearing from our field of view every single second. Since the beginning of this chapter, tens of millions of stars have crossed the threshold into the unobservable void. They didn't hit a wall. They didn't reach an edge. They simply moved into a region of space that is receding from us so fast that the link of causality has been snapped forever. We are watching a slow-motion evaporation of the cosmos. Our observable universe is shrinking in terms of what we can actually reach, even as the particle horizon appears to grow. This is the psychological weight of the 46 billion light-year ghost. We use it to feel as though we are in a vast, grand container, but the reality is that we are in a darkening room where the lights are being turned off one by one, starting from the outside and moving in. Eventually, the expansion of space will become so extreme that even the nearest galaxies outside our own local group will vanish behind this event horizon. Future astronomers on a distant Earth might look up at a sky that is completely black, devoid of other galaxies, unaware that they once lived in a bustling city of trillions of worlds. They will see no edge, because the horizon will have tightened so much that it essentially becomes a vacuum. We were wrong about the edge of the universe because we thought it was something we could eventually touch or reach if we just flew far enough. But the edge is not a destination. It is a symptom of our isolation. It is the point where the universe's expansion mocks the speed of light. Every star that vanishes is a reminder that we are being quarantined in a bubble of our own making, watching as the rest of existence waves goodbye with a fading red shifted light. The observable universe isn't the map of a place, it's a list of the things that haven't left us yet. And that list is getting shorter by 60,000 stars every second. The true edge is the silence that follows when the last farewell photo finally fades to black. We have spent centuries terrified of the abyss, of the moment the ground falls away and we find ourselves staring into a void where space simply ceases to be. But there is a possibility far more claustrophobic than an infinite empty desert. What if the universe isn't a room with a distant, unreachable wall, but a house with no exits, where every hallway, no matter how straight you think you're walking, eventually leads you back to the front door? This is the concept of a finite but unbounded universe, a reality that refuses to have an edge not because it is infinite, but because its very geometry is a trap. To grasp this, we have to discard our three-dimensional common sense and look at the world through the eyes of an ant. Imagine an ant crawling across the surface of a massive, inflated balloon. As far as the ant is concerned, its world is flat and goes on forever. It can march in a perfectly straight line for its entire life, and it will never hit a wall, never fall off a ledge, and never find a sign that says the end. From the ant's perspective, the world is infinite, and yet we, looking down from a higher dimension, can see that the balloon is a self-contained object with a measurable, finite surface area. The ant isn't walking forever, it's walking in a loop, curved through a dimension it cannot perceive. In our reality, we are those ants, and our three-dimensional space may be the skin of a four-dimensional hypersphere, or, more provocatively, a hyperdonut, a torus. In this toroidal model, space is curled back on itself in multiple directions. If you were to board a spacecraft and burn your engines in one direction, never turning, never wavering, you would eventually see a familiar faint glimmer ahead of you. It wouldn't be a new galaxy or a strange new frontier. It would be the Milky Way. You would have traveled the entire circumference of the cosmos only to return to Earth from the opposite side of the sky, having never encountered a single boundary. This is where the geometry of the loop creates what cosmologists call the cosmic hall of mirrors. In a universe that loops, light doesn't just travel from point A to point B, it circles the entire structure, potentially multiple times. When we point our telescopes into the deepest reaches of the void, we aren't just looking at distant objects. We might be looking at ghost images of things that are much closer to us, including ourselves. Because the donut might be thinner in one direction than another, light taking the shorter path around the loop arrives sooner than light taking the long way. Imagine the unsettling implications for an astronomer. You look to the north and witness the violent, spectacular birth of a star in a distant cluster. Then you turn your telescope to the south, and in a galaxy that looks remarkably similar, you see that exact same star collapsing into a black hole. You are seeing the same object at two different moments in its history, because its light has reached you from two different directions around the cosmic loop. In this temporal hall of mirrors, the night sky is a lie. It is a confusing collection of repetitions where a single galaxy could be reflected dozens of times, each version showing that galaxy at a different age. This realization shatters our understanding of the universe's scale. If the universe is a hyperdonut, it could actually be the smallest possible version of reality, potentially only a few times larger than the portion we can currently see. The vast, trillion galaxy expanse we think we inhabit might be an illusion of geometry, a kaleidoscopic trick of light reflecting through a self-contained loop. We think we are looking at a bustling city of unique worlds, but we might just be standing in a small room lined with mirrors, mistaking our own reflections for a crowd. But there is a darker, more disturbing layer to this no-edge reality found in the deep lore of cosmic topology. If you were to complete the journey around the loop and return home, the Earth you find might not be the one you left. Some models suggest that our universe could be non-orientable, much like a three-dimensional version of a Mobius strip. If you were to fly along an orientation-reversing loop, you would return to find a mirror copy of your home. Your heart would be on the right side of your chest. Every clock would tick counterclockwise. Every book would be written in a script that only makes sense when held up to a mirror. You would be a stranger in a home that looks perfect but is structurally inverted. Even in a standard, orientable torus, the loop introduces the horror of infinite repetition. If the laws of physics are the same throughout this self-contained structure, and the space is finite but the time is long, then every combination of particles is destined to repeat. In a loop, the you that is watching this video right now is not unique. Somewhere else in the loop, perhaps billions of light years ahead or behind, another version of you is doing the exact same thing, trapped in the same geometry, searching for the same non-existent edge. We were wrong about the edge of the universe because we thought it was a wall that protected us from the outside. We didn't realize that the lack of a boundary is what truly isolates us. We are living in a self-contained trap, a geometric hall of mirrors where we can never truly leave and where everything we see is just a ghost of something that has already happened. The edge isn't a distance you can travel to. It is the realization that no matter how far you go, you are only ever heading back to where you started, perhaps slightly altered, perhaps forever mirrored, but always, inevitably, contained. The universe doesn't need a wall to keep you inside, when the very fabric of space is a circle that never ends. We have spent this journey dismantling the physical walls of the cosmos, replacing the idea of a jagged edge with the fluid geometry of loops and horizons. But there is a more fundamental boundary that is currently collapsing, not a boundary of space, but a boundary of logic. To understand why our entire model of the beginning might be a collective delusion, we have to look at something so small it fits inside the palm of your hand. We need to talk about lithium. You likely know lithium as the silent heartbeat of the modern world. It is the soft, silver-white metal that powers the smartphone in your pocket and the laptop on your desk. It is an element so simple it has only 3 protons in its nucleus, making it one of the few building blocks created in the literal first seconds of existence. Because of this simplicity, lithium was supposed to be the smoking gun for our Big Bang models. If we truly understood the oven that cooked the universe, we should be able to predict exactly how much lithium was left in the pan. But as we peer toward the temporal edge of the universe, we are discovering a hole in reality that is exactly 3 times larger than it should be. According to the Big Bang model, the early universe was a churning soup of radiation and fundamental particles. For the first 99 seconds, it was too hot for atoms to even exist. The intense energy would have shredded any nucleus the moment it tried to form. But as the universe expanded and the temperature plummeted to a mere billion degrees, the strong nuclear force finally took hold. Protons and neutrons began to fuse. This process, known as Big Bang nucleosynthesis, is remarkably precise. Our equations predict that the primeval universe should have been roughly 76% hydrogen and 24% helium. When we point our telescopes at the oldest, most distant stars, that is exactly what we find. In the case of these two elements, our math is nearly perfect, a triumph of human reason. But then there is the black sheep of the periodic table. Our models also predict that a very tiny specific amount of lithium-7 should have been forged in that same cosmic furnace. Yet, when we examine the spectroscopic fingerprints of the most primordial stars near the edge of our perception, the lithium isn't there. It isn't just slightly off. It is 3 times less prevalent than our most trusted theories allow. This isn't a minor rounding error. This is a screaming alarm that our understanding of the universe's beginning and its boundaries is fundamentally incomplete. If the universe is the scrambled egg we've been trying to solve, then lithium is the ingredient that suggests we don't even know what kind of egg we started with. The mystery only deepens when we look at lithium's rarer sibling, lithium-6. While the total amount of lithium is too low, the ratio of these isotopes is catastrophically wrong. Lithium-6 is an isotope so unstable it should be nearly non-existent in the early universe, yet it appears in our observations a staggering 1,000 times more frequently than it should. We are looking at a chemical signature that defies the very laws of physics we use to build our cosmic timeline. This is where the psychological engagement turns into a disturbing implication. If we are 300% wrong about the most basic, lightweight elements in the universe, what does that say about our certainty regarding the edge? We have built a narrative of a 13.8 billion-year-old universe with a defined start and a defined horizon. But the lithium problem suggests that the 0 hour we've spent a century defending might be a cognitive artifact, a psychological threshold we constructed to make the infinite feel manageable. Some cosmologists are now forced to consider a radical possibility that the beginning wasn't a singularity at all. Stephen Hawking himself eventually moved away from the idea of a start point, suggesting instead the no-boundary proposal, where time and space form a smooth, self-contained geometry with no origin point and no outer wall. In this view, the reason our lithium numbers don't match the Big Bang is that there was no bang in the way we've been taught to visualize it. We have been searching for the shell of the cosmic egg, only to realize we are swimming in an infinite yolk that never had a container. There are only 2 ways out of this paradox, and neither is comforting. The first is that our observations are flawed, that the stars we are looking at are somehow special cases that have destroyed their lithium, hiding the true nature of the early universe from our eyes. This would mean that the universe is actively concealing its history, leaving us to build our models on ghost data. The second possibility is far more unsettling. Our models are wrong. We are using a 13.8 billion year clock to measure a reality that might be nearly twice that age, or perhaps doesn't have an age at all. The lithium hole is more than just a chemical discrepancy. It is proof that the edge is an information limit. As we approach the cosmic horizon, the signals we receive don't just get dimmer, they start to lose coherence. The very building blocks of matter begin to disagree with our logic. We see galaxies like Mom Z14 forming too early, stars like Methuselah that appear older than the universe itself, and a lithium deficit that mocks our most advanced simulations. We have lived in a world of finite objects for so long that we cannot imagine a reality without a boundary. We define our existence by the walls of our experience, but lithium is the crack in that wall. It is a tangible, physical reminder that the universe does not have to conform to our expectations of geometry or containment. The edge was never a distance to be reached, it was a symptom of our isolation and our failed models. If we are 3x wrong about a simple metal that we use in our phone batteries, we are likely 3x wrong about the nature of the vacuum, the speed of expansion, and the very fabric of the outside. The lithium problem is the realization that we are still ancient sailors, staring at the horizon and fearing a jagged lip of stone, while the ocean beneath us is actually a loop. We haven't yet learned to navigate. We are staring at a scrambled reality and realizing that the recipe we've been following was written for a different universe entirely. The hole in our model isn't just a gap in knowledge, it is the true edge of our understanding. And as we move forward into the no-boundary reality of the deep cosmos, we have to ask ourselves, if the foundations of matter are this elusive, what is actually waiting for us? At the point where time itself begins to fade. For nearly a century, we have been told a story of a single violent spark, a pinprick of infinite heat and density that exploded into the void, creating everything we see. We called it the singularity, the absolute zero hour of existence. It was a comfortable boundary, a solid wall at the beginning of time that gave our reality a neat, linear beginning. We visualized the universe as a container that was once empty and then suddenly filled. But tonight we must confront the fact that the man who helped build that wall spent the final years of his life trying to convince the world it wasn't there. Stephen Hawking, working alongside Roger Penrose, originally provided the mathematical proof that a singularity was inevitable, that if you rewound the cosmic clock, the universe must have started as a point of infinite density. It was a triumph of general relativity. But as Hawking looked deeper into the quantum mist of the early cosmos, he realized that a singularity is not a physical reality. It is a place where our math fails. It is a scar on our models, a sharp edge that nature likely doesn't possess. Hawking began to propose something far more radical and unsettling, the no-boundary proposal. This theory suggests that we were wrong about the origin because we were looking for a start in a structure that has no beginning. To understand this shift, we have to recognize the fundamental war between the two pillars of physics. General relativity, which governs the massive world of stars and galaxies, demands a singularity, a hard edge in time where everything began. But quantum mechanics, the laws of the subatomic world, hates singularities. At the smallest scales, reality is fuzzy, vibrating, and uncertain. Hawking realized that as you approach the supposed Big Bang, the universe becomes so small that quantum effects take over. In this state, the sharp point of the singularity disappears, smoothed out by quantum fluctuations. This is where the narrative of the cracked egg begins to fail us. We have been searching for the moment the shell broke, but the no-boundary proposal suggests that the universe is an unbroken egg, a self-contained geometry that never needed a hand to crack it. In the standard Big Bang model, time is like a straight line that starts at a specific dot. You can follow that line back and back until you hit the beginning. But in Hawking's revised vision, as you move toward the start of the universe, time begins to behave like a fourth dimension of space. This is a concept that is nearly impossible for the human brain to visualize, but the implications are staggering. It means that in the earliest moments of reality, there was no ticking clock. There was only geometry. Hawking used the analogy of the Earth's South Pole to explain this. If you walk south, you eventually reach the South Pole. If you were to ask someone at the pole, which way is further south, they would look at you with confusion. There is no south of the South Pole. However, the South Pole is not a wall, it is not an edge, it is not a place where the earth ends and an abyss begins. It is simply a smooth, finite point on a curved surface. The no-boundary proposal suggests that the Big Bang is the South Pole of the universe. It is a point in time where the dimension of before simply ceases to exist, not because there's a boundary, but because the geometry of spacetime has curved back on itself. This shatters our most basic intuition about causality. We are evolved to believe that every effect must have a cause, and every beginning must have a before. But a universe with no boundary is a universe that is completely self-contained. It is a structure that simply is. If you could look at the four-dimensional shape of the cosmos from the outside, though there is no outside, it would look like a smooth, closed shuttlecock. There is no outer wall to this structure, because the surface of a sphere or a torus doesn't have an outer wall. It is finite in extent, but it has no edge. This realization brings a profound sense of existential unease. We have spent centuries looking for the architect, the spark, or the initial conditions that set the universe in motion. But if the no-boundary proposal is correct, the universe had no initial conditions. It is a mathematical necessity, a self-consistent loop that requires no external input to exist. This is the lore of the smooth origin that most popular videos ignore because it is too disturbing to contemplate. It suggests that the edge of time is a cognitive artifact, a psychological threshold we project onto the cosmos because we are incapable of imagining a reality without a container. We insisted on a Big Bang with a definite start date because our human experience is defined by birth and death, start and finish. But as we peer toward the temporal horizon with telescopes like the James Webb, and we see galaxies like MOM Z14 that formed too early, we are seeing the cracks in our linear story. These impossible objects are not breaking the laws of physics. They are revealing that our 13.8 billion year clock is a man-made cage. If time becomes space at the origin, then the universe didn't wait for stars to form. The stars are simply part of a vast, four-dimensional geometry where early and late are just different points on a smooth curve. The no-boundary proposal replaces the violent explosion of the Big Bang with a quiet, elegant transition. It suggests that the universe emerged from a state of imaginary time where the laws of physics were completely different. In this regime, there was no entropy, no scrambling of the egg, and no before. There was only a self-contained, finite geometry. This means that the edge we are searching for isn't 46 billion light years away in space, and it isn't 13.8 billion years away in time. The edge is the moment your logic fails, the point where your three-dimensional brain tries to find a wall in a reality that is perfectly, terrifyingly smooth. We were wrong about the edge of the universe because we thought it was a place where things stopped. We didn't realize that the edge is actually the place where our perception of before and after dissolves into the eternal geometry of the whole. The universe doesn't need a boundary to define it, because it is a closed system that contains its own beginning, its own end, and everything in between held together by nothing but the curvature of its own existence. We have spent our journey dismantling the physical walls of the cosmos, replacing the idea of a jagged edge with the fluid geometry of loops and horizons. But as we push deeper into the void, we encounter a boundary far more absolute and far more terrifying than a mere distance in space. This is the information horizon, the point where the universe doesn't just end, but where reality itself begins to fade into an incomprehensible static. We have been taught to think of the edge as a location we could eventually reach if we flew fast enough, but the emerging lore of cosmology suggests that the edge is actually a limit of knowledge, a threshold where the very data that constructs our world starts to lose its coherence. Imagine you are watching a high-definition video of a distant galaxy. As you zoom in, you expect to see more detail, more stars, more dust, more structure. But at a certain point, the image doesn't just get blurrier, it begins to pixelate. The smooth shapes of the spiral arms break down into jagged, multicolored blocks that bear no resemblance to a galaxy. This is not a failure of your eyes or your telescope, it is a failure of the information itself. In our universe, we are beginning to realize that the edge is the point where the cosmic resolution drops to zero. As we gaze toward that 46 billion light-year ghost, we aren't just seeing objects that are far away, we are seeing the farewell photos of reality as they are being, corrupted by the vacuum. This corruption is what scientists call the information decoherence limit. To understand it, we must look at the way light travels through the expanding void. We know that as light from a distant galaxy crosses billions of light years of stretching space, it is redshifted. Its wavelength is pulled toward the long red end of the spectrum. But there is a deeper, more disturbing implication that most videos ignore. As information approaches the cosmic event horizon, that invisible boundary 16 billion light years away, it doesn't just get redder. It begins to lose its causal connection to the rest of the universe. The data packets of reality, the photons and particles that carry the story of what is happening out there, are being shredded by the expansion of space. By the time the light from a galaxy beyond the event horizon reaches our telescopes, it is no longer a live feed. It is a ghost image, a frozen, motionless relic of a world that we can no longer influence and that can no longer influence us. We are essentially peering into a graveyard of possibilities. But even these ghosts are fading. The information they carry is losing its coherence, breaking down into patterns that our current laws of physics cannot comprehend. It is as if the universe is a massive calculation, and we have reached the limit of the processing power. Beyond this horizon, the rendering of space and time simply stops, leaving behind nothing but the white noise of the quantum void. This brings us to the most unsettling piece of evidence for this fading reality, the cosmic microwave background, or the CMB. For decades, we have viewed the CMB as a picture of the infant universe, a snapshot taken 380,000 years after the Big Bang. But if we view the edge as an information limit, the CMB takes on a much darker character. It is the ultimate boundary of our knowledge, a literal wall of static that blocks our view of anything that came before. We see it everywhere we look in the night sky, a faint, persistent hum of microwave radiation that tells us that beyond a certain point, the universe is simply not yet calculated or unrenderable by our logic. This suggests a radical shift in how we perceive existence. If the edge is an information limit, then the universe is not a thing in the traditional sense. It is not a container filled with matter. Instead, reality may be emergent, arising from deeper, more fundamental quantum or computational processes. In this framework, the universe doesn't have an edge because it doesn't need one. It only exists where there is enough informational coherence to sustain the laws of physics. When we look at the lithium hole or the impossible galaxies like MOM Z14, we aren't just seeing scientific anomalies. We are seeing glitches in the system. places where the information of the early universe is breaking down and refusing to conform to the recipe we've been using. The scrambled egg paradox we discussed earlier is more than a metaphor, it is a description of the state of our data. We are trying to unscramble a universe whose original code is being systematically erased by the expansion of space. We see 96.7% of the galaxies in our sky already gone, their light still reaching us like a lingering echo, but their information already beyond our reach. We are becoming increasingly isolated in a bubble of our own making, watching as the rest of existence waves goodbye with a fading, corrupted light. This realization creates a profound sense of existential unease. If we were to board a ship and fly toward the 46 billion light-year ghost, we wouldn't hit a wall, and we wouldn't loop back, not at first. Instead, we would witness the world around us slowly losing its definition. The stars would thin out, not because there are fewer of them, but because the space between them is no longer capable of maintaining the resolution required for matter to exist. The laws of physics would begin to shift and blur, much like the laws of a computer game might fail as a player approaches the map boundary. The edge is not a distance you can visit, it is a psychological and informational threshold where the story of the universe simply runs out of pages. We were wrong about the edge of the universe because we thought it was a physical destination. We didn't realize that we are biological machines trapped in a logic of limits, desperately searching for a cage that isn't there. The true edge is the silence that follows when the last bit of coherent data finally fades to black. We aren't just living in an expanding universe, we are living in a dissolving one, where the information horizon is the true limit of our existence. The ghost that haunts our maps isn't a wall of stone, it is the realization that reality itself is a fragile projection, and we are standing at the point where the projector is, starting to fail. We have spent this journey dismantling the physical walls of the cosmos, replacing the idea of a jagged edge with the fluid geometry of loops and the haunting isolation of horizons. But there is a final possibility, one that admits there is a boundary, yet suggests it is far more alien than a simple wall. If the no-boundary proposal described the universe as a smooth, self-contained egg, this new reality suggests we are merely a single bubble of steam trapped inside a boiling pot of infinite proportions. This is the realm of eternal inflation, and it suggests that what we call the edge is not a physical end to space, but a phase transition, a membrane where the very laws of physics that define your existence begin to dissolve and rewrite themselves into something else entirely. To understand this, we have to look at the process that created us. Most people visualize the Big Bang as a singular explosion, but many modern cosmologists believe that the bang was merely the moment when a process called inflation ended in our local patch of space. Imagine an infinite, primordial sea of energy that is expanding at an exponential, mind-breaking speed, faster than light, faster than any human calculation can track. This is the multiverse, an eternally inflating background that never stops growing. However, in tiny localized pockets, this inflation occasionally slows down. When it does, that energy is dumped into the creation of matter and radiation. In that moment, a bubble is born. We are living inside one of those bubbles. In this framework, the edge of the universe is the membrane of our bubble. If you were to board a ship and travel beyond the 46 billion light-year ghost of our observable horizon, you wouldn't find a void or a loop, but a region where the fabric of reality itself undergoes a fundamental shift. Think of it like the boundary between ice and water, or steam and liquid. In our bubble, the temperature of the vacuum settled into the specific values we know. Gravity has a certain strength, light moves at a specific speed, and atoms are held together by the strong nuclear force. But as you approach the membrane of our universe, these values begin to fluctuate. This is the disturbing implication that standard documentaries miss. Our laws of physics are not universal truths, they are merely localized weather patterns. As you cross the phase transition at the edge of our bubble, the very geometry of space could change. You might enter a region where the vacuum is still inflating at exponential speeds, or you might find yourself in another bubble where the laws of physics are so different that atoms cannot even form. In another bubble, gravity might be repulsive, or there might be 7 spatial dimensions instead of 3. The edge is the point where the you made of protons, neutrons, and electrons becomes a physical impossibility. You wouldn't just leave the universe, you would be unmade as you transitioned into a physical regime that doesn't support your specific biological architecture. This turns the edge into a psychological and physical threshold of the highest order. We are used to thinking of boundaries as things we can cross and remain ourselves, like crossing a border between countries. But the edge of a bubble universe is a causal and structural firewall. The space outside our bubble is still inflating so fast that even if you could move at the speed of light, you could never reach a neighboring universe. You are quarantined not by a wall of stone, but by the sheer, violent expansion of the space between the bubbles. We are drifting in a froth of infinite realities, each a self-contained island with its own unique recipe of physics. This lore angle transforms the crisis in cosmology and the lithium hole into something even more profound. If we see glitches in our early data, or galaxies like MOM Z14 that seem too cooked for their age, perhaps it's because our bubble didn't start in a perfect, uniform way. Perhaps we are seeing the subtle influences of collisions with other bubble universes that occurred in the distant past, ripples in the CMB that suggest our bubble isn't as isolated as it seems. The edge isn't 46 billion light years away, it is the limit of our specific physical consistency. Imagine a spacecraft traveling farther than any before it, expecting to reach a boundary, only to find that the stars begin to thin out and the very light from its engines begins to behave in ways that defy its onboard computers. The laws of thermodynamics might start to fray at the edges. Time might begin to stutter or flow in multiple directions. The edge is revealed to be a boundary between different physical regimes where the meaning of existence shifts. This realization creates a sense of existential unease that the observable universe model cannot match. It suggests that we are not the masters of a vast, infinite cosmos, but occupants of a single, fragile drop of water in a storm of infinite, alien seas. The unscrambled egg is not just our history, it is the realization that the egg itself is just one of an infinite number of eggs being cooked in a multiverse we can never truly see. We were wrong about the edge of the universe because we thought it was the end of space. We didn't realize it was just the end of our version of reality. The membrane is not a wall, it is a translation. And on the other side of that translation, the word human, the word atom, and the word time may have no meaning at all. We are prisoners of a physical phase transition, forever locked within the specific temperature of our own bubble, while the rest of the multiverse rages on in a state of eternal, incomprehensible inflation. The edge is the point where our story stops being written in a language we can understand and begins to fade into the chaotic, beautiful, and terrifying static of the infinite. Other. Tonight, we confront the terrifying possibility that the greatest distance you can travel in this universe is simply a long way back to a home that is no longer yours. Imagine drifting in the absolute silence of deep space for 1,000 years, the pilot of a craft that has outrun light and outlived civilizations. You have spent your entire life chasing the edge, pushing through the ghost horizons and the pixelating static of the information limit, only to find that the void never ends. But then, a familiar pattern of stars begins to coalesce in the distance. You recognize the spiraling silver of the Milky Way, the specific yellow glow of a middle-aged sun, and finally, the pale blue marble of Earth. You have traveled in a perfectly straight line for trillions of miles, and yet, you have returned to your starting point. You land, expecting a hero's welcome or the comfort of the familiar, but as you step onto the soil, you realize with a jolt of pure ice in your veins that the world is slightly wrong. The constellations are mirrored. The people speak a language that sounds like your own played in reverse. You haven't found the end of the universe, you have found the trap of its geometry, and you are about to realize that in a reality that loops, the you who left is no longer thee. You who returned. We have spent our journey dismantling the physical walls of the cosmos, but now we must face a possibility far more claustrophobic than an infinite empty desert, the concept of a finite but unbounded universe. This is the geometric trap, a reality that refuses to have an edge, not because it is infinite, but because its very fabric is a house with no exits. For centuries, we looked for the exit sign, but if our universe is a three-dimensional version of a hyperdonut, a torus, then there is no outside. In this model, space is curled back on itself in every direction. If you were to board an Alcubierre-class warp ship and burn the mass energy of entire stars to fly in one direction, never turning, never wavering, you would not hit a wall. You would eventually see a familiar faint glimmer ahead of you, the Milky Way, and you would return to Earth from the opposite side of the sky. This return, however, is where the toroidal shift turns a scientific curiosity into an existential nightmare. In a universe that loops, we inhabit a cosmic hall of mirrors. Because light can circle the entire structure multiple times, the night sky becomes a confusing collection of repetitions. When you look through your telescope at a distant galaxy, you might be looking at a ghost image of our own Milky Way as it was billions of years ago. This realization shatters our understanding of scale. If the universe is a hyperdonut, it could actually be the smallest possible version of reality, potentially only a few times larger than the observable portion. We think we are looking at a bustling city of trillions of unique worlds, but we might just be standing in a small room lined with mirrors, mistaking our own reflections for a crowd. But the loop is rarely perfect. There is a darker, more disturbing layer to this no-edge reality found in the deep lore of cosmic topology, nano-reentability. Some models suggest that our universe could be a three-dimensional version of a Mobius strip. If you were to fly along an orientation-reversing loop, you would complete your journey only to find a mirror copy of your home. You walk into your house, but your heart is now on the right side of your chest. Every clock on the wall ticks counterclockwise. Every book you ever loved is now written in a script that only makes sense when held up to a mirror. You are a stranger in a home that looks perfect but is structurally inverted. You haven't reached an edge, but you have crossed a threshold where the you that exists no longer matches the you of the world around you. This leads us to the most unsettling philosophical twist of the infinite loop. If the universe is finite in volume but loops forever, or if it is truly infinite and goes on forever, we are forced to confront the paradox of repetition. Everything in existence is made of a finite amount of different particles, and a finite number of particles can only be combined in a finite number of ways. In a loop or an infinite expanse, every combination of particles is destined to repeat. Right now, somewhere else in the loop, perhaps billions of light years ahead or behind you, there is an exact copy of you watching this very video, doing and thinking the exact same thing as you. This is where the toroidal shift challenges our very sense of self. If there is an exact copy of you, identical down to the last neuron and the last memory, which one is the original? In a self-contained loop with no beginning and no end, the concept of an original vanishes. You are just one iteration in a temporal hall of mirrors, a recurring pattern in a geometry that doesn't care about your individuality. We were wrong about the edge of the universe because we thought a boundary was what defined us. We didn't realize that the lack of a boundary is what truly isolates us, trapping us in an infinite cycle of unfamiliar homes. Imagine the traveler who returns from their loop, finding their mirror copy home and seeing another version of themselves already living their life. They realized that they didn't just loop through space, they looped through the scramble of the cosmic egg. They are a subtle inconsistency in a system that demands perfection. The edge wasn't a distance they could visit, it was the realization that no matter how far they went, they were only ever heading back to a version of where they started, perhaps. Slightly altered, perhaps forever mirrored, but always, inevitably, contained. The universe doesn't need a wall to keep you inside when the very fabric of space is a circle that never ends. You are part of an unscrambled egg that realized it never had a shell to begin with, swimming in an infinite yolk where every direction is just a path back to yourself. As we look at the stars, we aren't seeing a vast frontier, we are seeing the back of our own heads reflected across the curvature of the dark. We are the inhabitants of a hyperdonut who spent billions of dollars looking for the edge of the frosting, never realizing that the hole in the middle is the only thing we can't reach. The true edge of the universe is the moment you realize that there is no outside to go to, and there is no you that isn't already repeated 10 decillion times in the dark. We were looking for a wall, but all we found was a mirror. We have spent this journey looking outward, straining our eyes against a 46 billion light-year ghost and mourning the 60,000 stars that vanish into the infrared silence. Every second, we have obsessed over the where, searching for a wall, a loop, or a bubble membrane that marks the end of our reality. But as we reach the conclusion of our dismantling, we realize the most unsettling truth of all: the edge was never out there in the dark. The true boundary of the universe is not a destination you can reach with a faster engine or an infinite lifespan. It is a direction you are incapable of pointing to, a dimension that is currently saturated around every single atom in your body. We were looking for a wall at the end of a long road, never realizing that we are the two-dimensional inhabitants of a world whose edge is the very fabric we are printed upon. To understand this, we have to look through the eyes of the two-dimensional beings we imagined earlier. To a being living on a flat 2D plane, their world seems infinite. They can walk forever in any direction and never hit a wall. They might search for the edge of their universe for eons, convinced it must be somewhere far across the horizon. But if that 2D world is embedded in our 3D reality, we can see exactly where their edge is. It isn't 1,000 miles away. It is the up and down they cannot perceive. Their edge is the third dimension that is in contact with every point of their flat existence simultaneously. We can see the underside of their world, every atom of their being spread before us, because their boundary is everywhere at once, yet completely unreachable to them. We are in the exact same position. Our three-dimensional space, the stars, the galaxies, and the very air you breathe, is likely the surface of a four-dimensional structure. This means the edge of the universe is not 46 billion light-years away in the distance. It is up or out into the fourth dimension, a direction that exists at every coordinate of our reality. Every atom in your brain is in direct contact with this higher dimensional boundary. We don't see it because our biological hardware is evolved to process a three-dimensional world of finite objects. We project edges into the distance as a cognitive artifact, a psychological safety net to keep us from realizing that we are saturated by a dimension we can never enter. The universe doesn't need an outer wall to contain us because the fourth dimension acts as a structural cage that is present at every point in space. This realization brings us back to the scrambled egg paradox that has haunted our investigation. We looked at the impossible galaxies like Mom Z14 and the lithium hole as evidence that our timeline was broken, that the egg had been scrambled in a way that defied our recipes. We looked for the shell of that egg, the singularity or the starting spark that marked the beginning of the scramble. But the unscrambled egg is finally revealed to us not as a return to a whole yolk, but as the realization that the universe never needed a shell to begin with. If the universe is a self-contained, infinite cycle, a no-boundary structure where time behaves like space, then the distinction between the beginning and the edge completely collapses. In this smooth, finite geometry, there is no 0 hour and there is no outer wall. The crisis in cosmology isn't a failure of the universe, it is the failure of our three-dimensional linear logic. We insisted on a Big Bang with a definite start date because we are small, finite beings who live lives with a birth and a death. We demanded a boundary to make the infinite feel small enough to grasp. But the universe is a closed loop of information and geometry that contains its own origin and its own destination within itself. The scrambled egg was never about an object being broken. It was about our perspective being fragmented. We are the ones who scrambled the data by trying to fit a four-dimensional, self-contained reality into a three-dimensional, bounded box. When we see stars that are too old or galaxies that form too fast, we are merely seeing the curvature of a cycle we haven't yet learned to read. The lithium problem is not a chemical error, it is a physical reminder that the recipe of the universe is written in a language of loops and smooth transitions, not explosions and walls. Tonight, we must accept the unsettling comfort of the infinite cycle. We are not living in a container that is expanding into a void. We are part of a structure that is everything. There is no outside to reach, no before to find, and no edge to fall over. We are swimming in an infinite yoke that is its own container, its own beginning, and its own end. The edge you've been chasing your whole life is closer than your own skin. It is the fourth dimension saturated around every atom, the silent geometry that ensures that no matter how far we travel, we are always exactly where we need to be. We were wrong about the edge of the universe because we thought it was a place where existence stopped. We were wrong because we looked for a boundary in the distance rather than the dimension that holds us together. The universe is not a room with a door. It is a self-consistent thought, a perfect unscrambled loop that needs no shell to define it. And as we look one last time at the fading red light of the 46 billion light-year ghost, we can finally let go of the fear of the abyss. There is no wall to hit. There is only the infinite cycle, the fourth dimension everywhere, and the realization that we are, and have always been, the structure itself. The egg was never cracked. The universe is whole. And the only edge that ever existed was the limit of our own imagination.